When it comes to true crime stories, Occam's razor is the principle that the most obvious solution to an unsolved mystery is probably the correct one. Usually it's correct, but sometimes there are mysterious cases with twists that nobody expected. Number 5. For half a year, Donna Graybeal from Billerica, Massachusetts, thought she might be the victim of a true crime, as she dealt with harassing phone calls from a mysterious unknown caller. Donna ran a food service repair company and had recently acquired an 800 line for her business. The phone line was used by a number of clients, but every 90 minutes, like clockwork, she would get a call from someone else. When Donna answered the harassing phone calls, there would be nobody on the other end. The only noise was what sounded like a rush of air. Then whoever had called would hang up. Over a 6-month period, Donna received more than 2,600 phone calls from this mysterious caller. At first, she thought there was something wrong with her fax machine, but after ruling that out, she believed it might have been something more sinister. Donna thought that it might be someone trying to determine when she was home, so the caller could break in when she was away. But the calls were so systematic and continuous, going throughout the night. If this was the harasser's goal, then something would have happened relatively quickly. She didn't want to change the number. This was before the internet was commonplace, so getting word out to all of her customers about the change of number would have been difficult. Instead, she contacted the police. It wasn't hard for police to trace the calls. They were coming from a home 8 hours away in a suburb of Potomac, Maryland. The home belonged to an elderly couple named Theodore and Elizabeth James. They denied making the calls, and an inspection of their phone bills didn't show up the harassing calls. The mystery continued. But the Jameses had been aware of something strange happening with their phone lines for a while. For years, there would be times when they would pick up the phone to make a call, only to hear the sound of someone else dialing. This would happen even when they were home alone. The couple thought that the house might be haunted and referred to the caller as the ghost caller. However, there was a much less supernatural answer to the strange mystery. The Jameses had a boiler that 8 years earlier had been part of a short-lived scheme by Stewart Petroleum. An automatic dialer had been attached which would call the company when it was running low on fuel. The scheme hadn't lasted long, and the number was disconnected when the company's residential division was sold. But something, possibly a power surge, had reawoken the boiler, and it began making calls again. At first, they wouldn't connect to anywhere, but when Donna acquired the phone number for her business, the calls went to her instead. In the end, a technician was sent to the Jameses' home to disconnect the boiler from the telephone wires, and Donna was allowed to live in peace once again. Number 4. In 1991, Unsolved Mysteries ran a segment about an unusual mysterious case that only got stranger as more was discovered. In January of that year, a man was discovered wandering in the Nevada desert. He was severely dehydrated, wearing 3 layers of clothes, and had no form of identification on him. He was taken to the hospital where he was diagnosed with a form of amnesia caused by a traumatic event. The nurses there gave him the name Tyler Doe. After recovering from his dehydration, he tried to get his life together, but with no security number, he could only get work and housing through a charity. Tyler's fingerprints were taken, but didn't match any police had on record, and he didn't match the description of any known missing person case. After about 9 months, the charity cut funding and Tyler had to rely on friends for money. At that point, he knew he needed to try to get his old identity back. He contacted Unsolved Mysteries, and a segment about him aired in October of that year. Immediately, the show was contacted by a man who claimed to know Tyler, his father. As it would turn out, his real name was Paul Arthur Beal, and he was wanted by police in Idaho. Beal had been working for a food delivery company and had disappeared while transporting a shipment of frozen food to Nevada. He was reported missing, only to be found by police a few days later. He still had the truck, but the merchandise inside had disappeared. Beal was questioned by police in Nevada, but released as they believed he would go back to Idaho to face charges there. When he disappeared again, nobody reported him missing as it was believed he was on the run from the law. After the Unsolved Mysteries segment aired, Beale was arrested. His father bailed him out, though he never believed the amnesia story. To a lot of people that had known Beale before he vanished, this was just a scheme to get out of trouble. It didn't work, as he was charged with a grand larceny and served 90 days in jail. His father paid the company he had stolen from restitution. Beale continued to claim he couldn't remember anything from his old life, and moved away from those that had known him before. He had an estranged wife and 2 children before he vanished, but never got back in touch with them. Years later, Beale suffered a heart attack and was placed in a care facility. If he had been faking the amnesia for years, he never revealed this secret, and it's likely that final part of the mystery will never definitively be solved. Number 3. In 2013, Jose Lentigua told his wife he had a rare brain disease which was incurable. Together, they broke the news to their family. Lentigua wanted the children to remember him while he was still healthy, so he traveled to Venezuela for treatment. Not long after he left, his wife Daphne received news that he had passed away. To the outside world, Daphne played the grieving widow, including going to the insurance companies to try to cash out the $6 million life insurance policies that he had. The only problem was there was no evidence that he had actually passed away. The insurance companies found the case very suspicious. Lentigua was supposedly a wealthy Cuban immigrant who had moved to America years earlier. He ran a second-hand furniture company, which was apparently doing well. In reality, he had accumulated mountains of debts. Even so, it didn't make sense for him to go to Venezuela, which was in the middle of an internal crisis, for treatment for the brain disease. If he had wanted to go somewhere for end-of-life care away from his family, the United States would have been better suited. Investigators went to Venezuela, where Lentigua's story quickly fell apart. The places where he was supposed to have been didn't make sense, and the people who were supposed to have confirmed that he'd passed away had never seen him. There was no evidence he had actually passed away, so now the only question was where he was. That mystery was solved in 2015. An application was made for an American passport for a man named Ernest Willis, but there was already a passport on file under that name for an African-American man. The photo that had been sent for this new passport did not resemble Willis at all. Instead, facial recognition technology matched it exactly to Lentigua's old passport. The handwritten forms were also confirmed to have identical handwriting to Lentigua's, and the next of kin was given as Daphne. Federal agents went to the address Lentigua had given and arrested him. It emerged not only had he faked his illness and his passing, he also lied to his wife to convince her to go along with the scheme. Lentigua hadn't told Daphne about his debts. Instead, he told her that he'd been a special operative agent years earlier and had led a team that took out a Mexican cartel leader. Now the gang was after Lentigua and his family, and the only way he could protect them was by faking his passing. Daphne had genuinely feared for her family's lives. Even after they were arrested, Daphne believed the story until eventually the truth emerged. He was imprisoned for 14 years, while she was placed on probation for 5 years. Number 2. In 1993, Joanne Chambers was a kindergarten teacher in Coolbaugh, Pennsylvania. She was well liked by her students, their parents, and her fellow members of staff, and appeared to be very good at her job. But somebody apparently didn't agree. The school started to receive anonymous letters about Chambers, claiming she was unprofessional because of what she wore and how she taught. The letters gradually got more and more serious, accusing Chambers of serious crimes. Chambers also received personal letters threatening her life and her home. Her face was pasted over disturbing images, and at one point, a Barbie voodoo doll was sent to the school, complete with red paint. At this point, everyone thought Chambers genuinely feared for her life. She told the TV show Forensic Files that every day when she said goodbye to her husband, she worried it would be the last time. On one occasion, she received a wound to her hand when someone taped a blade to her car door handle. The police got involved, and soon a fellow teacher named Paula Newrocky became the primary suspect. Paula was well liked, but was much stricter than Chambers. However, she had shown her coworkers sympathy throughout the ordeal. Paula came under the spotlight when she was seen on CCTV going into Chambers' classroom and retrieving her mug. Chambers had recently received a letter threatening to poison her drink. Paula claimed that Chambers had asked her to get the mug, but it was enough to put Paula on the police radar. Next up was a polygraph test, which each teacher in the school took. Paula was the only one to fail. It's important to note that lie detector tests aren't really good evidence and can be easily manipulated, but it's still evidence to the police that Paula was responsible. They didn't have anything that would stand up in court though, and Paula continued to teach at the school until Chambers called police and accused Paula of tailgating her. Paula was arrested and charged with hundreds of counts of harassment and more serious offenses. But as soon as she was charged, things began to take a weirder turn. The typewriter used to write the threatening letters was not the one in the New Rocky family home. Neither Paula nor her husband's DNA matched that found on one of the envelopes and a stamp. The harassment against Chambers did stop after Paula was arrested, but there were holes in the case. Paula hired her own private investigator to clear her name. They discovered that the DNA found actually matched Chambers, who had a history of tall tales and false harassment accusations at her old school. Despite this, the case went to trial. Paula was found not guilty. She was allowed to continue working after clearing her name a second time, and was awarded compensation from the school and Chambers. Remarkably, Chambers also continued teaching, albeit at another school, and wasn't charged with any crimes for the ordeal she put Paula through. Number 1. On June 11, 1986, a young woman named Susan Snow from Auburn, Washington, took 2 extra-strength Excedrin capsules for a headache. Her husband took 2 more for his arthritis and then left for work. Later that day, Susan's daughter would find her passed out on the bathroom floor. She would later pass away in the hospital. An autopsy revealed the cause was cyanide poisoning. Investigators went to the Snow home to try to find the source of the cyanide. After walking backwards through the last 5 hours of Susan's life, they came across the bottle of painkillers. Inside, they found 3 poisoned capsules. Susan's husband had been lucky enough to take 2 of the clean tablets, but Susan had not. This was not long after the Tylenol poisonings in Chicago, a mysterious case that still remains unsolved. Bristol Myers, the owner of the company that produced the tablets, feared something similar might be happening in Washington. The fear only grew worse when another tampered bottle was discovered in nearby Kent. The company issued a warning and a recall, as well as a reward for information that would lead to the person responsible being found. The day after the Kent bottle was discovered, the lot number of Susan's bottle was made public, and another woman came forward claiming to have 2 of the poisoned bottles. Stella Nickel had lost her husband, Bruce, 6 days before Susan passed away. He had taken 4 capsules for a headache. He collapsed not long after and wouldn't wake up. His passing was ruled as due to natural causes, but Nickel had been petitioning for his body to be re-examined ever since. She was certain that it was something else, and when his body was examined again, traces of cyanide were found. Nickel handed over 2 bottles of the capsules to police. She claimed to have bought them at different times and at different places, indicating this was a more widespread problem. The only problem was there had only been a handful of tampered bottles found in the entire country. It was a pretty big coincidence if Nickel had managed to find 2. As investigators looked into the case more evidence against Nickel was found. Along with cyanide, there were traces of algicide found in the capsules, an algicide Nickel was known to use for her fish tanks. Nickel had also taken out multiple life insurance policies on Bruce, with a larger payout for accidents rather than passing by natural causes. The ruling that he had been poisoned meant that she was entitled to a lot more money. It was later discovered she'd checked out books on poisons from the local library, and told her own daughter how she wanted to get rid of her husband. Nickel was arrested and found guilty of tampering and causing the passing of Bruce and Susan, and she was given a 99-year prison sentence. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But I've been Ty Knots, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.